All right, thanks for the welcome. Hello, everybody. Um, I wanted to comment first. I have some cards to give you, and they're down here on the stage. One of the monoprints here, and at the end, you're welcome to come get one if you'd like to have one. But I wanted to. I'm talking a lot today with students and faculty, staff about community and your education beyond art school, which needs to be major. You need to get out and do a lot of things beyond art school. And so I wanted to, make some acknowledgments. We read off, my vita and three different schools: University of Kansas, Tyler School of Art, and Royal College of Art. But I wanted to share that my principal knowledge base, or after school, but probably beyond even the eclipsing school, is with the Cheyenne ceremonial leadership of our tribe. And I've had 4 instructors. The first instructor his last name is Peak Hart, like a heart rising up, tall like a mountain, Paul Peak Hart. And that was 4 years of instruction in our ceremonial learning. And then the second phase of my learning was conducted with Roy Dean Bull Cumming, and these are all in Oklahoma, western Oklahoma, and that was another 4 years of mentoring. And then the third experience was with Roy Dean's older brother, who's since passed. His name is Vernon Bull Cumming. And he lived in Montana and Oklahoma both. There's Northern Cheyenne, Southern Cheyenne. And then more recently, 4 more years with Jasper Wache. Jasper Wache is in Weatherford, Oklahoma, western Oklahoma, maybe about an hour west of Oklahoma City. So with those 4 men that helped me, I gather my knowledge, and then I'm now an instructor to transfer that to younger men. So I have a young man who's working with me right now too. So that's the important part of learning is your community and your elders. And I encourage everyone to go back home, wherever home is, and find the elders and help the elders. And someday, I don't want to shock you, but someday you'll be an elder, and they'll be asking you questions. So you need to know. And someone would say, I don't have any community. Well, you better go make one, go find one, because it's so important. And we focus so much on the academy, which is like a flatlining thing. It can't take you very far, so you need to go back further than the academy, in my estimation. And so the first slide is Ho'otzio here on the screen. A little hard to see it right now with the sun, but my grandmother, lightning woman, Ho'otzio, Heap of Birds. She was also a redbird howling crane. And I honor indigenous women tonight. We have to step forward and place that honor on all Native women, all indigenous women. And in my estimation, I just have to say that they've carried us so far. They've carried us as far as we are today, And I honor women today with my grandmother. My daughter, Ho'otzio, she's 10 years old now, and so she's taken the name of my grandmother. Ho'otzio here is holding her daughter, Dorothy, Heap of Birds, and they both passed now. The reference I start with is the horizon. I'm sorry the slide is so light, but it's the horizon looking west of Oklahoma City. And so certainly the community of life for Native people is based on the geography and plants and animals, the stars, where you find yourself. So I'm in Oklahoma. I've been back since like 1981 or so. And I'm going to show you a whole journey of art from the 80s and maybe even the 70s a bit till today. And but that horizon, it really gives us much kind of inspiration and informs the tribe, and that's where the geometrical art comes from seeing that sky and that space which is very different if you went to the forests, the woodlands, where things are more curvilinear, like leaves and flowers, whereas on the prairie it's very harsh, looking all the way up through Manitoba, Saskatchewan to Oklahoma. It's very, very geometrical. And the community, again, on the far left is my grandfather, Guy Heap of Birds. He's got a headdress on. Next to him is Black Wolf Heap of Birds. Grace Big Bear is the elder mother there in the center. Heap of Birds was first translated as monumental, which is actually magpie birds, many of the magpies together. And Black Wolf's father was one of the 4 principal chiefs of the Cheyenne Nation. And so he had that solo name of many magpies, or monumental. Later, of course, after the massacres and genocide, they picked up these surnames and whatnot, so first names, last names. But the name came from his father, who was a prisoner of war in Fort Marion, Florida. I've been also very privileged to have other mentors beyond the ceremonial mentoring that I mentioned. And so Black Bear Bolson, very, very important artist, and was mentioned in the introduction of the land honoring, the Comanche. And so Kiowa Comanche, so Black Bear made a wonderful sculpture, which is still up in Wichita, Kansas. And he is a Kiowa Comanche artist. And so he was local in Wichita. That's Black Bear. And so it was great to have his mentoring. Primarily, I would have to say it's not a real critical, hard-edge art experience in that day and time of the 50s and 60s, but that he was just there as an artist, and he showed us that you could be an artist. And he was kind to the community, he interacted with the community, Native American Center, and so on. So I was privileged to be able to talk to him, and he would show me work that he was doing when I was in high school. His most famous painting is Prairie Fire, and this is at the Philbrook Art Center in Tulsa. And so this was celebrated actually as part of the anti-protest of the Rockefeller collection at the Whitney Museum back in the 70s. And so really a very poetic painting with the visuals of the fire and the animals and the people being on the same level of this beautiful force. And his most major work is From Whence All Life, and it's actually at the Native American Center in Wichita, Kansas. It was in a bank for many, many years. They relocated, as I understand, back to the Indian Center, where Black Bear was on the board of directors. And just a wonderful painting. It's about a 30-foot mural, and it deals with, on the left, creation of the world from the Southwest, from Dene, Navajo culture. Center, more of the Godhead, spirit, and then on the right, the prairie, the buffalo, and the warrior, and so on. And I was really very, very privileged to be able to see him painting this painting. And he took me back to show me the piece. And I'm really, really proud of that moment. And we lost Black Bear when he was 58, I think, and really tragic loss. He was really getting into finding his own realm, and he enjoyed Salvador Dali as well, so he was moving into other phases that we're never going to be able to see. So Black Bear Bolson. My first painting, Kansas, University of Kansas, and painting class. This is a 6 foot by 6 foot acrylic on canvas. And there, again, that's why I showed the first slide of the horizon. And that was just done intuitively. So living in Kansas, growing up in Kansas, moving back and forth to Oklahoma, having that prairie, having that vista, something that was just part of my design sensibility. And I painted this painting as one of my first pieces. I've also been doing serigraphy for quite some time. This is when I was probably like a junior in college at KU. And the planes intersecting, kind of more of a formalist piece. It's about a 12-inch serigraph. And so fairly advanced for a young kid, making this work. And I did prints and paintings, both. I was also befriended by a Delaware Lenape artist. His name is Don Secondine. And I also pay homage tonight to all the artists that, in a sense, didn't continue and you have to be very, very upfront about being an artist in the sense of, will you continue being an artist? Probably not. In my graduating class in one of the most prestigious art schools in America, I think there's 2 of us working right now after 30 years. So that's just the truth of the matter. But that doesn't mean that you weren't an artist or that you didn't contribute. You can go for a certain amount of time. It's like a relay, and then you hand it off to somebody else maybe. So Second Dine isn't really working anymore, but he did give me a great deal of insight, particularly into the Kiowa, which was his wife's family. We did a piece out on the prairie of Kansas, and it was in a landscape painting class, and we didn't want to do easel painting, so we actually made earthworks. And so at the time, his wife's mother had died in Anadarko, Oklahoma, just north of here, and he wanted to make a memorial to her, and she was a Chano, her last name. So we got a tree, and it was a fallen tree, and we embellished it, we painted it. We also put cedar in the center there, right here, the cedar, which cedar, of course, is about spirits and blessings. But I was young in my ceremonial knowledge as well, kind of urbanized, and so he taught me a bit about that. And I'm mentioning this because, of course, in my contemporary practice, I have major pieces of memorial works. And so this was happening probably like 1973 or 1975 or so. At the top, we have a horsetail, and it was from Delaware false face masks that Don Second Dine was making. He was also a student of Dick West Sr., a very important Cheyenne painter in Lawrence, Kansas. So Dick West, who I also studied a tiny bit with Dick West as well. So this was very important for me to have this experience to work with Don and make a memorial piece for his mother-in-law, the Kiowa lady. I would later know the family of the Kiowa, and they would come to our ceremony, and we would actually work together in the lodge. In 1975, I talked to the students today a bit about how to extend yourself beyond the academy, but to also have different experiences in your life. Traveling, a major part of how you'll enrich yourself. So I took a summer and I continued my education, but I went to California College of Arts and Crafts in Oakland. I lived in Berkeley, and that was a real eye-opening experience, wonderful time. Bob Marley and the Whalers were coming to town, that kind of thing was happening. And so when I got back from the Bay Area, I was very confused. And I think that's, in some way, that's a hallmark of my traveling. I come back more confused than I was before I left. And so I've got to reset myself in a sense. And so I couldn't continue those paintings that were very geometrical. And one night I was dumpster diving. I was taking some trash out in a city street in Lawrence, Kansas, and I found a bunch of cardboard that was used to make packing for refrigerators and washing machines. And I came back to the studio and made this construction. And then I really delved into this whole body of work out of trash, found objects, and I'll show you a few of those. These were all about maybe 8 feet across, 10 feet across, and maybe 7 feet tall. This one was made with tar paper and some plexiglass, tar paper on the side here, the black, and some carpet padding, And of course, I was in some ways disappointed, but I had to roll with the punches. But I didn't have a politicized faculty, and we had nobody that was a native or African American. We had 2 Asian professors, but neither of those professors were politicized either. So we had kind of by and large a formalist status of art, and you have that primarily in America. You have a formalist idiom. I taught at Yale University, which is like a tragic place. It's a very tragic formalist place. I don't know if it got any better. I'm going to go there in November to lecture, so I'll let you know. But it's not so healthy. So anyway, I did get very versed in formalist tools, and this is one of my favorite pieces here that I did in that time frame. but we couldn't talk about Native issues and land rights and sovereignty per se. We weren't encouraged to do that. And then later the work got even more and more fluid. This is how they're coming off the wall. But I really look at that time as a very important time for my art practice in terms of really taking space and location and, in a sense, I'm going to say dominating it, but really making it your own space. And I continue to do that. You know, maybe you'll see the show, or maybe you think about that at UNT. But the work has to really have a presence in the space. You know, so I still have that as an intention. Going back home to Oklahoma was always part of what I had in mind, and this is a tree, a juniper tree, a dead tree with lovely wood. It's on top of a location called Mount Scott, a very charged location in that it's where Fort Sill is, and Fort Sill, you might know, is the largest artillery base on Earth, and so they stage all the big guns for Afghanistan at Fort Sill. You know, they've killed everybody around the world from Fort Sill, and they've also held Geronimo there as a POW, and he died there at Fort Sill. So the Kiowa Comanche are around that area, and Apache, and so the Cheyenne were involved with that. But I want to have this picture that my son took, Wookgim, and that's Wookgim, one of his photo pieces about his hair being cut. And so going back home to Oklahoma from Kansas, later from Philadelphia, later from London, was very primary to go back home and have that tree available with the foliage on it. This is my son Wookgim. He'll be with me in New York next week. We're going to go to New York City for a few days. We work together in London and elsewhere. He does photography. But this is the moccasin pattern. I did another serigraph, and it was done first by my grandmother, Lightning Woman, Huitzio. So this is the toe section of a moccasin, the toe part of a woman's moccasin. And these are mountains, you know, and these are star patterns. So it's very much a rendition of the universe, and you wear it on your feet as a Cheyenne woman. But for me, you know, I didn't really know the difference of men and women per se. I had to learn all those things in terms of symbolism and iconography. But I took this moccasin that she used as her pattern, and then I made my own print at a Cheyenne art festival on the reservation, probably like 1976 or so, maybe somewhere in there. And then I made paintings in Philadelphia at Tyler School of Art. And so I was taking those shapes from London, but also from Kansas. This kind of painting form that I had done at KU, I continued that at the Royal College of Art too. But I combined that with the painting images of the moccasin pattern, and then there's still one shape here, right there. So then the moccasin pattern here as well. And so for me, it was my kind of my methodology or my wish that I would have the kind of the European formalist mode of painting, and then the Native American Cheyenne woman's design, have them have a battle, and whoever won, I'd go with them, you know. So they fought, you know, in a sense. And of course, the white man stuff lost, which is good. And then the Cheyenne woman's way won. And so that was how I got politicized and got more involved with sovereignty and so on. This is a image of Vito Acconci, kind of this ominous. You can hardly see him. His face is right here. That's one of his mask pieces, and that's my piece on the wall about the massacre at the Washita with Colonel Custer. But Vito Acconci is a very, very important performance artist. He was a poet. He's passed also. But Vito came to our graduate class at Tyler School of Art and just changed everything. He gave a talk one night, and he was so sexual and so based on power issues and just very, very edgy in a major way. It kind of caused a feud within the graduate program. You know, some artists said he wasn't an artist at all. I mean, some of my colleagues said that's not art. You know, and you know you're in good territory when you say you're not making art. You know, that's not art. That's how good the art is. It's not art. You know, And when I said, that's the best art I've ever seen. So he kind of gave me, in a sense, the permission to move ahead in my own way. I wasn't making very good art, but I moved ahead. And then it would be like 1983 or somewhere in there, I would be hanging up my piece about the Washington Massacre and backing up to look at it, admire myself, and bump into somebody, and it was Vito Conchi hanging up his piece, you know. So I've had that major privilege to be shown with Claes Oldenburg, with Vito Conchi, as a young artist. And another mentor is Stanley Whitney. He taught at the Collage School of Art. He was never allowed to teach me because they had a pecking order at Tyler. Again, the formalist sort of strategy. You had to have a solo show in Soho to teach the graduate students. You couldn't be a good artist. You had to have a gallery. You know? And so Stanley is one of the major painters on earth now. He's got galleries everywhere, museum collections. But in 1978, he didn't. So they wouldn't let him teach me, you know. But we still fought through that, and then we were friends. I went to a studio in Cooper Square all the time, you know, St. Mark's Place in New York City. He came to Oklahoma. He came to our ceremony. We became, you know, very strong friends back in the 90s and 80s and so forth. And I don't see him much anymore, but he lives in Italy and also in New York. He's a great painter, and he does abstract pieces. And I think some of the flatness and the color and the movement I owe to Stanley, you know. And he had a major show at the Studio Museum of Harlem, which is wonderful, and he's doing very, very well, Stanley Whitney. The work I was making at Tyler School of Art, this is an example of that. This is about a 7-foot drawing, collage. And so for me, like a lot of students might do this, I think it's kind of a student behavior, but as a young artist, you kind of just throw everything in the composition. You throw everything in there and see what it does. And so my life in Philadelphia, 77, 78, this is a basketball team, the Philadelphia 76ers. There's a TP from Anadarko. Haskell was a school at Canton, Kansas. So all these things are just part of my life that I was experiencing, putting me into the work. The text started becoming a principal part of my practice, and it was something that I think still remains fairly clear and explicit. You can be very explicit with text. And of course, the text can be very rapid. You know, you can actually invade someone's psyche with it, you know, before they can't defend themselves. If they can read. So they've already read it, you know, they've already internalized it in a sense. So I like that. But in this point, it was kind of a lamentation. It was like a feeling bad about something in that when I had my thesis exhibit at Tyler School of Art, my MFA thesis, no one could come to my show who was Cheyenne. We didn't have the resources to bring anybody from Oklahoma or Kansas to my show. And I wondered what should I do about that, and I was happy to be able to graduate and move out of that program, but so I ended up writing my names in the gallery, you know, along with my work. And so Howling Crane was Hoitzio's name, her father's name, Howling Crane. And so I wrote Howling Crane, Many Magpies, my Arapaho, my mother, she's from the North family. So I wrote many of the names of my relatives in the gallery with red cardboard kind of die-cut letters. And then I put my artwork up too, you know. And so that was the first kind of time I pushed heavy into the text itself. In my research about my family, which happened around the same time, I found a very sad part of history in that, as I mentioned earlier, Black Wolf, the man with the pipe in the photograph, his father was Chief Many Magpies, or Chief Heap of Birds, or Heap of Birds and Heap of Birds. He was a prisoner of war in Florida, and he would be one of the 4 principal chiefs of the Cheyenne Nation. And so here they are after the Washington Massacre. They've been taken to Florida, and they're very, very, you know, distressed, and they're under the gun. They're actually left their families, and they actually killed one of the chiefs on the way to Florida from Oklahoma. And they went through Fort Sill also to get to Florida. So that kind of incarceration without any really charges or due process, or they weren't citizens enough to even have a trial, anything that was fair. I find that to be an American tradition, and we have that in Camp X-Ray, and that's Guantanamo Bay today, tonight, tomorrow, where we have men incarcerated without charges, without identities, without any kind of due process, and that's fine in America. That's fine. That's how we do things in America. And so, but that started out with Cheyenne warriors, Apache warriors, Kiowa Comanche warriors in Florida. While these warriors were in prison in St. Augustine, Florida, Fort Marion, my grandfather's, there was art made in prison, and it's celebrated now. There's books written about it. We've talked about it many times in catalogs and exhibitions. And this is one of my favorite pieces. This is a drawing by Bear's Heart, and he's given you his recollection of the army coming. And these are all soldiers and horses and guns moving across a prairie in this linear fashion. And that was very counter to the circularity of the way animals run or trees grow or rivers flow. So this kind of linear assault, he was trying to chronicle that. And I really have a lot of respect for his work in that he's been taken from his family, he's in Florida, he's under the gun, he's in prison, and he's making art about his prisoner guards. He's making art about the army, which is really, really very, very brave. My work had a major turn when I researched the Fort Marion prisoners of war, and I made a list of the names of the prisoners of war, the POWs, and I found a captain, his name was Captain Pratt, and he was their major jailer, and he killed one chief on the way, but he took the rest and the warriors to Florida and kept them in prison. He had a list of his prisoners, and I found it at the Oklahoma Historical Society. So I found the actual handwritten list he wrote. And so I made a painting. This is the painting here, and that's sort of me about 40 years ago, right here. But all these words are the prisoners of war. So Heap of Birds was at the top of the list: Bear Shill, Mahnimik is Eagle Head, Medicine Water, Common Siva. Our introductions were made today by saying Haki Avi's little chief, that's my name. So the man I'm named after through my uncle, he was also a prisoner of war there in Florida. So that's part of our history. But all these words were ways to imprison the Cheyenne people. Of course, they took something about magpies, many of them together, and they turned it into Heap of Birds. Later it would be Heap of Birds. And so one has to really become in control of the language, because it will imprison you, as a non, Anglo person. It will really define you and hurt you if you don't grab it and control it. So I made a list. It's called Fort Marion Lizards, and this was one of my first major compositions with language text. I showed that in a museum in Philadelphia at my first solo show when I was 26 years old in a museum. And I had a little bit of problem with the museum. It was an ethnographic museum, so they weren't very happy with a lot of my political work, and they were more involved with sort of like, not tourist work, but very, very aesthetic work. They didn't want to see a lot of words and whatnot. And so they actually had me in order to do the exhibition, they wanted big, huge wall text captions made for every piece in the show, so that they could say, this is what that means, which I find to be a limited way to look at art. So it's very painful to create wall text and limit my work. But what I did do is I took words out of those wall text pieces, and I was asked to be in a major show of artist community art in New York City, a place called just above Midtown in Lower Manhattan. And so I made this piece called Understanding the Uniqueness of an Ethnic Entity. And it's about a 7-foot by 5-foot wall panel. And I installed it in the gallery. And so the same kind of desire and this kind of issue of reporting to be an informant about your culture to the white society. It's still an expectation, it's still expected that you should report on your culture, maybe for a little bit for entertainment, but for learning and whatnot. And so I made this piece, and I found it would be kind of a tough expectation. So these are seemingly Cheyenne words, and then English connotation, how they transfer, something like a glossary, and at the bottom it says wrong question. But at the end of the day, it wasn't realized very broadly, but all of the words on the left are animals. So no one got the right Cheyenne lesson. They got a lie, And they were all like sounding them out, aka-cha-cha, like, trying to say Cheyenne words. And I think it's really funny. And so no one really realized they didn't have the right truth. You know so little about Native people, they might be telling you all fiction. You wouldn't even know, You think you're like a Boy Scout in Boy Scout camp trying to be an Indian, and it don't work that way. So I showed this piece, and lo and behold, as time goes on, it's pretty amazing, but this is the piece in my studio right now, and the Museum of Modern Art, I've been working with them. They've collected 48 of my pieces, contemporary printmaking I did last year, and I had a show at MoMA. But anyway, they know my work now. We're buddies. And so they said, what about that piece you showed, Edgar, at Jam, And I drug it out of the storage. I wiped off all the dust. And now they're showing it at MoMA. This is going to be at MoMA in a couple of years, So it's amazing. So hang on to your work. You never know what's going to happen. So I go back to Oklahoma. I leave Philadelphia. I take that piece off the wall in Tribeca and take it with me. It'll go back to New York in a couple of years. And this is the red earth that I went back to. And it was it wasn't in so much a re-entry, but it was the first entry. I never lived there really. I was urbanized, and my father worked in aircraft factories, and we left Oklahoma to gain labor, wherewithal, to have a family and so on. My father, he had 6 kids. So going back to the earth, back to the reservation, 500 acres of former, territory of Cheyenne people, and very important to go back. But I didn't stay. I mean, it's not like it's like an either or. So I would go back to New York and work there as well, come back to Oklahoma. And so I was selected as one of the artists to be in Times Square, the first computer billboard in Times Square in 1982. It says Tatistas said Viha spider. There's red word, it says Tatistas. Tatistas is Cheyenne in our language. So it was called In Our Language. And it was a very important event. It was, I look back at it, and I know there's been more research about it, certainly, but I think there were 8 to 10 artists in that project, and some of them, most of them are very, very well known. David Hammonds, Keith Haring, Jenny Holzer, Barbara Kruger, Billy Sullivan, Jane Dixon, all these major New York artists, and we were all kind of youngish. Even Hans Hock was involved for a little bit. And so we got to know each other, and we made messages on the computer billboard. And this message just says that the white man's a spider. So in Cheyenne language, Viha is spider. So you go back to, and it had 10 different cells, Viha wrapped up, Viha trap you, Viha catch you, so on and like the spider does. And so because of the fences, barbed wire fences, all these things, the grid over the earth, like a web, all these behaviors, the Cheyenne called the white man Viha, and before they even made some of those things. So it's pretty amazing symbolism. I also showed in Brooklyn, this is the military terminal, it was called Preparing for War. I showed with group material, very important collaborative group. And that was the piece I showed with Vito Conchi earlier, Vito. And this is the massacre piece about Custer and the Washita Massacre and the words that I put on the wall. My first public art piece next to the event with the computer billboard was in City Hall Park, and that was done in 1988. I was part of a group of artists with the Public Art Fund of New York City, and it's an important moment because I was taught by another artist, a Wampanoag artist from Boston area, a tribal artist, and he was very humble and very gracious to acknowledge all the tribes, like what was done today, in a sense, our opening remarks. And he would acknowledge all the leaders and so on. And I learned that from him. In that when I came back to New York, I didn't make art about myself anymore. I made art about the tribes that were already there. So I did 12. I was trying to put up 12 panels in City Hall Park. I got censored. I got to put up 8. So we're still working on the other 4 in another project. It's been so many years, 88, but Mohawk. And I turned around backwards New York to have them look at their past differently, more realistically. And that's called the Native Host Series. And I execute those on college campuses, cities, Vancouver, University of Kansas collected 5 of those. They're up right now. Pitzer College has 4 in LA. Crystal Bridges has 7 at the museum in Bentonville, Arkansas. They're all over the country, and they're permanent. There's many of them are very permanent. This is the one I did in Salt Lake City at the University of Utah. And we also correct the name of the tribe, because almost all the tribal names are errors. So this was Nuchi, and I asked those students, what is the real name for the Ute tribe? And they said it's Nuchi. The Ute doesn't mean anything. So even Utah is an error. So we try to make those corrections. This is the piece that's at Crystal Bridges, and there's 7. And I'm doing some blue color like water and renewal. I also have one that I really like a lot that's in the Virgin Islands. I think it's one of the best ones with the cruise ship coming in. And they're coming to see, a good reggae festival or something. And they haven't really thought of the indigenous population that could be there, So I have some friends in St. Croix, and they're going to put this up. They kind of put it up around Columbus Day. They kind of stick out there and stick them up on the beach. And I have like 6 of them there on the St. Croix. I was there, and I was asked to go speak at the state legislature of the Virgin Islands, and it was wonderful. So I have a lot of links back to elders in communities. All these art pieces are made in consultation with community members. So here I am with the legislature of the Virgin Islands. And then Julie Bagani, who was Tongva from around the area of Claremont, California, kind of way east by the mountains in LA. And so she was my consultant, my elder for Pitzer College, and we did 20 sacred sites throughout all of LA, and they were all installed on the campus of Pitzer College. And so Julia was the person to identify those sacred sites and give me the text. And she wanted to be blue about renewal and water, so we made them blue. I did a major piece also for the Anchorage Museum in Alaska, and it was really amazing to be in Alaska. And there are 12 panels collected by the Anchorage Museum in Alaska, and it was about August, and it was pretty chilly there. My favorite moment was to go to the Prince William Sound and to go to the glacier and to actually find this ice. And so when I'm traveling and I'm making art, but I'm really getting guidance from the earth, and I made it a point to get to the ice, to the glacier, and we brought it up on board the ship, and we were able to bless ourselves with the ice from a long time ago. We're wonderful. I've also worked extensively in Africa, and it was an interest of mine. And people say, "Where'd you get the grant to do that?" You apply, and you can do that, but you go where you want to go. You don't go where they pay you to go. So I always wanted to go work in Africa, so I just went to Africa. I turned up in Cape Town, and things got very friendly, and I did a lot of work, and I had a studio there. My family came with me later. But these are 2 eagles, and the project was called Eagles Speak. This is the Cheyenne eagle from a shield, and that's the eagle from Great Zimbabwe. And Great Zimbabwe is the largest human structure built south of the Sahara. Wonderful in Zimbabwe. And so I visited that site, And I actually saw the eagles in the water in Botswana as well. So it was about the two eagles speaking together from Africa to Oklahoma. And I was so naive, I didn't know there were eagles in Africa. I thought that was an American thing. And I found the eagles there. And so it symbolized our unity as artists. On the far right, Thimbagosi Goniwe from Cape Town, township of Cape Town. And then in the center, Everett Tallok Whedon, he's a Narragansett man, and myself. And we had sponsorship, though, in this project from the RISD Museum, and I was a visiting professor at RISD for a semester, back and forth. But to do the show and work with these artists, also Cynthia Meeks, she was also involved. And what we call them, for a better term, they're called Black Indians. And so there's a lot of racism in America from Native people to African American people that want to claim Native ancestry, but there's not against white people. There's many white people can claim to be Native, but if an African American person does, then there's some problem with the class system. So I really wanted to challenge that by bringing in an African artist from Africa to Narragansett, Wampanoag, to meet community people. And we got along great and made artwork together, the four of us, in Rhode Island. I've also done the signs also in Oklahoma. That's Sooners, run backwards the other way, Cheyenne. And the tree that I showed you with leaves on it this time, or the foliage, the juniper tree. And that became a real touchstone for my painting. So the painting was a way for me to re-enter, not re-enter, but to come home in a sense, to be in that Oklahoma landscape. And it's called the Neuf series, which is Neuf is number 4 in Cheyenne. So I make 4 paintings at a time. And I exhibit my shows in 4 places often as well. So that's the Neuf painting. And then there they are on the wall of the barn. And I was also asked to be an artist in residence for many years in Maine, on Bar Harbor, Maine. And my family came with me. And a very important benefactor and printmaking kind of just a contributor, major way. Her name was Kippy Stroud, and she's from Philadelphia, and she ran the Fabric Workshop. That was her operation. So she had a wonderful artist in residence program for many years in Bar Harbor, and I was often asked to come, and I made paintings in the barn, which was wonderful to be by the ocean and also be by the forest. And so here are some of the newer paintings here, probably from like 2000 maybe, 11 or somewhere in there. And I work with the paintings to where they're very direct. I've always been very direct with my painting, and I start with the shapes, and then I overlay, and so often the beginning of the painting is not even visible anymore. It's like a storm rolls in, or the clouds roll in, or the leaves blow by, or the quill run by, or my dogs run by, or so there's some metaphors there. But I also, being from the Great Barrier Reef, from being in Australia, working with artists, from a project we had here at UNT, I went to Australia. But those kind of experiences from nature really have an impact on my painting, and so that's one of the paintings there. I've been working with a lot of blues, which can be like water, I guess, in a sense, or maybe fish. And here's a picture from Java, Bali. And I do a lot of work with fabric also, as far as collecting fabric, batik and silks, and from China, from Thailand, from Java, from Sumatra, Bali, Lombok. And so that's a reef. And so the reef has a big effect on my vision to see what's underneath the sea. Very, very bright colors. And one day I was just let off a boat and in the middle of the ocean, and I looked back and saw the volcano on Bali. So that's the Bali volcano. And so that experience of swimming with the sea turtles and being outside of Bali near Lombok, all that has really informed my sensibility. That's another one of the Neuf paintings. We had a show of this work with the blue signs in Pitzer College at Pomona College of Art. And more recently, I'm working a lot in Hawaii. I print in Hawaii with uh, the University of Hawaii, Manoa, and I'm there usually in December. And I work with Charlie Cohan, with a great master printer. We usually spend about a week in Honolulu, and I make monoprints. And I think some of the prints in the show here at UNT were made in Honolulu. And here's my studio in the North Shore, Turtle Bay, and I paint on the lanai, the back porch, and I take these little wooden panels, and I usually only use blue, and I don't take any white. You know, white's kind of a cheater way to paint, as you know. White, you can change everything with white. So I made a vow, in a sense, never to use white. You know, you have to make it change, make it move without white. You can't knock the value down or enhance it with white paint. You got to do it with other colors and make it all happen, you know, that way. So I don't use white. A couple years ago, I did a sabbatical from the University of Oklahoma, where I taught for 30 years, and I retired about 2 years ago, about 3 years ago. But I was really happy to do a major project in Singapore, and my family and I went to Singapore, and then I took a week off and went to Sumatra, to the amazing volcanic lake called Lake Toba. And it's the largest event on the earth of volcanic activity, next to Yellowstone. You know, so you can still see the crater from space, and you can go to the crater and live on the edge of the lake, which I did. But on that lake edge, there are about 5 villages, and they're all weavers. They're all weaving. This is an elder who weaves there, and you see the work in the background on the wall, some of the weavings here, like this here. So it was really wonderful to meet her and be with her on her area, and I brought some weavings back there as well. For the talk tonight, too, I added a new segment to what I want to share, and that's the language, the indigenous language that we're talking about tonight. And this is the Opera House, of course, it's Sydney Opera House. And we have the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney. There's a show called Localities of Desire, the Multiple Centers of Contemporary Art. And that's a museum right on the Circular Quay. It's right here. And so we had a project from this gallery here on your campus with Diana Block, and she and I organized support from the Lila Wallace Foundation, and we went to Australia, and I spent a lot of time. I lived there in Sydney and Adelaide, and that spun off into a major project called 16 Songs. But what I did also shows at the major art museums when I was in Australia, in Sydney particularly, and that's the Opera House. But the show we did there from the Contemporary Art Museum is kind of summed up by this image here. And an artist, her name is Fiona Foley, and she's from Fraser Island, which is kind of like East Australia, near Brisbane. And so she's a major artist in Australia and around the world. So she and I collaborated on a piece, and I want to read you the translation of the piece. On the left is what is called the Eora language, Eora. And so in Australia, you work with language groups, not so much tribes, but language groups. And actually tribes, it's kind of funny, but whenever I talk about tribes, they would get offended. And they said, no, you want to say that's your mob, you know. And I said, a mob is like people with a big club going to beat you up, you know. And they thought tribes were like primitive, you know. So we had a difference of opinion there. So you say, who's your mob? And they would say Eora. And so on the left is Fiona Foley's. On the right is Cheyenne from my language group. And then right there where I showed you, the Opera House, of course, all these things are colonial kind of degradation, but Captain Cook landed there, right there, at the Opera House, where the Opera House is now. That's where Cook came in to kind of brutalize the whole the whole nation. So of course Fiona didn't like that Captain Cook came to that place. So here's her translation. On the left, Eora language, milk, honey, oh you hurt me, set on fire, itchy, a war cry, blood, brave, black. And black is like an American in a sense, but that's the term used to describe all Aboriginal people, like a black fella, they would call you. And so the whole piece was called Learn a War Cry. And in a sense, it was provocative to make such a strong statement in Sydney. You know, it hadn't come to be a very politicized, you know, art scene, that place. And my piece on the right, I'll translate that, Cheyenne, Brits, ships, steal, hurt, learn, share, commonwealth. And that goes into the whole commonwealth, that sort of misnomer of commonwealth, of all these horrible colonies they made around the world. So that was great, Fiona and I. And it was like 95, I think, maybe earlier, but there were no computers, and we faxed this back and forth to write our words. And of course, it wasn't, there was a little didactic on the wall, but Fiona was adamant about not making any kind of translation really prominent. She wanted to have the oral language just stand, you know. And we kind of went back and forth about that a bit. You know, I thought we could translate it a little bit more in a way, but we didn't, you know. So it was the two languages shared at the Circular Quay where Captain Cook came in. I would later go snorkel where they killed him, you know, which is kind of cool. It's like over Kona in Hawaii. The work I do also reflects a unity globally with, I guess, what people call in a very negative phase language, animism, right? So religion should have a man in charge, I guess, like a pope or whatever, you know, Billy Graham or somebody. And if it doesn't have a man in charge, it's not a real religion, I guess. And you got to have a big idol to worship in, too, like a church. So a lot of tribes don't have any of those. And so my nation, there's no one in control of it. We know where it is, and it's up right now. They're going to take it down probably in February and rebuild it again. So it never stands for more than a few months. So no one can be in control of it and charge you a fee to get in it, or take some kind of favor from you to enter it. It has no keeper, you know. So there's no power that's yours to dole out to somebody else. But anyway, that goes around the world. You know, initially that was the way life was before the Christianity and other sects came in. But here is the medicine wheel in Wyoming, and it's a major site of stones put in the ground. And probably maybe 10 to 12 native nations today share that place, but it's nobody's place. And it goes back maybe 500 years. And these stones are all pointed toward different star systems, Regal, Sirius, and so on, all across. So I'll show you a couple notations here about what that does. This is the wheel itself here in Wyoming. It's up west of Sheridan in the Bighorn Mountains. And then if you take these stone spokes they're all tilted toward astronomical events above us right now, they become the rafters of the contemporary Earth Renewal Lodge. So these are the poles that hold up the universe. And then these stones are now cut cottonwood trees. And this religion goes from Oklahoma into Manitoba, Saskatchewan. Every tribe on the east face of the Rocky Mountains, in the prairies, not as far as Ohio or maybe Iowa, but many through the Intermountain area, they share the same priority. And so our nation, the men I mentioned earlier, the four instructors, they share this with me. And so I made a sculpture that had a relationship with those forks here, those forks that are there. And here's a sculpture. It's called Wheel. and it's at the Denver Art Museum. And so it's a 10-year project, $500,000 budget, and a lot of research and fabrication, steel and porcelain, done in Dallas, Fort Worth, actually, in a shop. And we trucked it to Denver. And so there are 12-foot tall trees that have the forks in them, and you would have the rafters go up. But I did not complete it to make it a ceremonial site. It's a reference, or it's contemporary art. And that'll be going back up. It's certainly, right now it's been reconfigured to be resited on a larger space at the Denver Art Museum. And you'll see that later, probably in about a year and a half, it'll go back out. And it's kind of autobiographical, has some prehistory, Anasazi, and then life of the peace of Bent's Fort, trading, and then later the Army massacres, genocide, and then people being submitted to boarding schools and all these things that have happened. But it goes back, in a sense, in a positive way, to be educated with advanced degrees, but to have a degree in the ceremonial knowledge. That's my daughter, Desba, maybe like 3 years ago, and I'm showing her the tree itself, one of the trees. And those are the magpie birds there I put on the trees. I did a talk in Beijing, at Beijing Normal, and I worked in China a bit, and Shanghai. But I just show this because this is a wonderful poster that a student made for me in Beijing, and she used the wheel sculpture as a jumping off point for my visit to Beijing. I'm also very happy to work with elders in my tribe and to extend the knowledge of the wheel and the medicine wheel. And of course, I have to say, certainly not everyone's going to know this knowledge. It's not like if you're older, you just are born with this knowledge, you know. Many people don't have it on the reservation. So to have a workshop I had 250 elders in Watonga, Oklahoma, and we have a program called Respect Program, and we work with children and elders. And I spearheaded a whole program with painting, and we had medicine wheels, and so this was a canvas, and the medicine wheel here, and the eagles here, water birds and eagles. And these are the sites of the two solstice. So that's sort of the major symbol I can leave you with tonight. If anything can be shared that's worthwhile, it is that in the winter, you'll have a short day. The sun will rise, if you go point toward Florida, southeast. A short day of the sun set by Arizona, southwest. Longest day of the year, sun will rise up toward Massachusetts. Big day, long day, set toward Washington State, Oregon, here. So those extremes of the sun is the main medicine wheel focus. And if you know what that is, then you know the extremes of the seasons. You know what that is. You know when plants will be maturing and then degrading. You know what that is. You know where the animals will be moving. You know what that is. That's your food supply. So you got to know what this is to live on this prairie where we are right in Texas. You need to know what that is, because things don't change with the cardinal directions. That's useless. It's about the solstice, that X that way. So anyway, I explained that to the elders, and we had a wonderful day of making paintings together. My mother was there, my sister was there. I've also done an action at the Fort Marion site, Fort Marion, Florida, where the prisoners of war were. And some of this work, I guess I have to say, it's all about insistence. You know, if you're thinking about political art or you're thinking about something provocative, you know, often you have to insist on it. It's not like, come on in here and make your provocative stuff. You know, no, they don't say that. You know, you have to insist that things have to be said. You know, and so I was at Fort Marion, and I went to the fort, and I told them we had to have a prayer for all the spirits that were lost in that fort. So we had to shut the fort down, make a fire, and bring the ceremonial pipe in there and smoke it, you know. And so here are sort of two nervous guards at the national park, and we did, and they allowed that. I guess I don't know if they allowed it, but we did it, and no one had really done that, you know. They come and they think about the history, go to the archive. But what about the people? What about the men and women that died? What about the kids that suffered? You know? So that was important, I feel. You know. Another memorial going forward is the work of the Venice Biennale called Motion Republics. And my son, Wookgim, he's younger here, but he and I went to Italy, my family, and we did work about Buffalo Bill's warriors who were killed during the Wild West shows. And we put up memorials across Venice, Italy. And here we have some text in the signs. There were, I think there were 16 of these. So, honor the death of Nestona. Nestona is a daughter in Cheyenne, and there were young children that died as well in the Wild West shows that were from the Sioux Nation. Standing Bear Rementare is to lament or worry and missing somebody. And so I made a memorial for every person that had died, but there was like about over 20 that I researched. There were burials all over Europe. And the thinking about the spectacle of the Venice Biennale, but also the Wild West show was a spectacle. And but I wanted to talk about how they came before I did, you know, the warriors, Buffalo Bill. And the best part of the project was to do glass blowing in Murano. Murano is the center of glass blowing on Earth, pretty much. It's a really wonderful place. A small island near Venice. And so I actually got to have a studio for 3 days. The Smithsonian was my sponsor at the Venice Biennale, and so they organized that effort. And so I took the glass, the big vases, and I made new pieces. And these are actually the bodies of the people that died on the glass. You know. So we've shown this together with the signs and the remnants of that. Another memorial is in London at King's Cross Station. And this is a genocide piece, about 25 million Red Indian lives lost. So those kind of things have to go back to Europe too, because Europe spawned all this disaster. It's not so much an American effort. It's really pre-American, the colonies and so on. And I put this up by the King's Cross Station where the train goes to Brussels, the Eurostar train. And one of my old favorites, the Cleveland football team, baseball team, there. I made that in '95, and the baseball team, they got mad and said I hurt their feelings. They said you dishonored our trademark. And so we challenged that. We put it on the newspaper. The Plain Dealer put it in the sports section, which is wonderful, in the sports section. And then they got so ashamed, they asked me to please make it anyway, come and make the billboards. And we made 3. We got anonymous donations came in, money came in to make more billboards. And I gave the whole copyright to the American Indian movement. And then they made bumper stickers and T-shirts and went on TV and everything. So important effort there in Cleveland. And then back to the earth of Oklahoma. So all this comes from Oklahoma. So I'm doing all these projects, but I'm always in Oklahoma on that red earth. American policy shown in Derry, Northern Ireland, part of a project with Orchard Gallery, kind of against the British occupation of Ireland. And this is we have 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. And I believe this is the one that the Whitney Museum collected. They collected 15 drawings. And of course, the sad history of Sand Creek Massacre, where the cavalry wearing yellow and blue uniforms cut open the uterus of the Cheyenne women and wore them as hat ornaments to really destroy any place to have a Cheyenne baby, uterine hats. Relocate, destroy. That was in Documenta in Germany, and it linked up with the Jewish Holocaust as well. And then my cover of Art in America, Do Not Dance for Pay, and kind of calling out all the Native artists who've been entertaining, you know, the Euro culture for so long with no good effect. And America is reversed backwards here. I turn America around on the cover of Art in America. And that is done in a sense to have them look at their past differently. My printers, Michael McCabe, my master printer in Santa Fe, Navajo brother, I was just printing there 2 weeks ago, and we made a new 48-piece work called Columbus Day from my travels in the Dominican Republic this summer. And that's the plate. We use the plate, and I paint backwards with plate oil, and we ink it up, and I'm doing different things with solvents too. My other printer, I want to give a shout out to all the printers. This doesn't happen by yourself. It's not a solo effort at all. And so John Greco, he has Josephine Press on Santa Monica Boulevard in LA, and he and I work together as well. And in Honolulu and Manoa, University of Hawaii, Manoa, this is Charlie Cohan, master printer, professor of printmaking. And I'll be back there with Charlie in December, doing a whole another 24-piece ghosted sections of work. And Charlie and I work together as well. And that's the Genocide and Democracy piece, which I showed in Vancouver. I'm also working with students, young students. I did a summer workshop in South Dakota this summer with young high school students, Native students, doing interventions on the campus. We did a circular intervention piece with their own yard signs, with their text, and they designed their own text messages. I worked with them for like 4 days, and we got a whole, like a 30-piece installation at the University of South Dakota. These are some of their messages. I really like this one here, this one about what could you be if I was blank, then I would be, Very, 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 very heady work, and they really did well with that. Another artist. So I do spend my time working with youth as well as elders. I did that also in Michigan State University in East Lansing, and that's a circular piece in the snow. And there we are with some professors and students holding up some of the signs. And so that's something I can do kind of quickly, and we have somebody fabricate the work, and we'll bring it out and install it, and have it up on campus or in a city center. That's a prototype, and that's the card that's here too, the monoprint. So I bring a prototype to show the students. And here are some of the monoprints from that series, Genocide and Democracy. So I'm using a lot of patriotic songs and kind of unpacking them and adding my own editorial. Pilgrim's Pride, Missing and Murdered Women. And of course, the Statue of Liberty had its back facing all the Native people as it welcomes everybody else. And of course, the democracy and genocide is built on the premise that you'll never have a demographic that can vote together as Native people, because the populations are spread out across this whole nation in such small amounts. They can't really vote together as a block. They're not in one place or anything like that. And certainly, in an optimistic note, Natives survive in spite of the empire. I did a project in Tokyo with a young artist, Japanese-American artist, and I did a piece about the liver, which is a monoprint about being lonesome, how that can damage your liver. And so it was really pretty nice, and it was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Tokyo, and so there are all these circular 24-inch pieces, and he kind of like smuggled them into the country and hung them up in the museum. The newest show, MoMA, PS1, Surviving Active Shooter Custer, and that was up, it just closed. And so that's the active shooter monoprints, there's 48 of those, and we're ghosting them now. So that's kind of a ghost set on the side. And the ghosts are the kind of remark about how we still survive even though there was genocide. There's still ghosts in America, Native communities in a sense. So I ghost every print now. I make a ghost to reflect the genocide that happened here. And there's Michael McCabe. We showed the piece first in Santa Fe, at Site Santa Fe in the Santa Fe Biennale last summer, I believe. And that's the active shooter, Custer, just the way they're set aside as single installations. And now we're shifting paper. You might see it here, but we're doing different colors of paper. This is another one I really like a lot. This is The Health of the People is the Highest Law, about Native health issues. And the blue tree on the left, an American policy from Northern Ireland, and the Whitney Museum. That was all in the show at MoMA PS1. And some of these are more personal. This is a blue tree, and so a major part of my work is just reflections on my own life. It's not about a politic or a very solid thematic piece. And Trail of Tears signs, I did these in Atlanta, near the Trail of Tears, and we had them at MoMA PS1. We had 3 sets of them there. And then we've got Speak Indian. This is about the 49 songs and about lyrics from songs that are after party songs on a powwow. Very intimate kind of native lyrics there. And then this is called Fort Supply, the fort that was used to restock Custer to massacre the tribe at the Washita River. So I did a 24-piece installation about that event as well. And these can be all researched. There's a lot of details, but I can't go into all those. And this is a new one called An Indian Home, and it kind of my reflections on the reservation and when I did visit the reservation and my grandmother's home and so on. And that's also ghosted as well. So some of these are more about just the daily life, not so much the politic, but daily life. And the last few here are the new pieces from Columbus Day. And I was in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, and also Punta Cana, and I visited Columbus's son's palace, and it was all very shocking. I don't know if you've been there, but there are a lot of slave irons there, where they put around your neck, and these torture things. And I've been in the Virgin Islands where the sugar mills are, and hiked down in the canyons where they carried the sugar up. So these are all about Columbus. There's 24 messages, so this ironic kind of tragic discourse. And we did, they're ghosted as well with different colors of paper. The brutality against the tribal Carib, Taino, and the diseases that were brought by the sale. And of course, the issue that we're not pre-Columbian. That's sadly still how, there's even art history. Do you study pre-Columbian? Why is it pre-Columbian? Who wants to be pre-Columbian? Why reference Columbus to describe native people? They got nothing to do with each other. If you're doing that, you're making a big mistake, Like pre-Hitler. Let's go pre-Hitler stuff. That's cool. No, you don't want that. But we have pre-Columbian art history, like insane. So that message is important. And the last couple of slides, the ceremonial sage, and I'll show you a short video, like about 2.5 minutes to close tonight. But the sage, to pray, to renew, and then again, Oklahoma, where we come home to, travel from, the ceremony uses the sage. And then family, my wife Shanna catching Heap of Birds, who's finishing her PhD in Middlesex University in London, studying on Native American performance art, and my daughter Hoitzio, the granddaughter of my family. So.